quick. Yep, it's working. I think this is session number 4. And I left off on this outline before. I don't know that you looked at it. Probably not. So I'm not sure how much. I don't think we covered this, so I'm just going to start with this. So after all this time,
After all what time?
70 years. That's been the theme. What in 2022? What are your biggest concerns for recording artists?
Biggest concerns what?
For recording artists.
Biggest concerns for recording artists.
Yeah, I mean, what are their biggest challenges, and what are you concerned about in terms of their viability, their ability to earn a living as recording artists? How would you advise a young recording artist, basically?
Get good representation.
Good. Now, you hear that a lot, good representation. Do you mean management? You need legal?
Management, attorney and management, yeah. And business management. All three.
But those will be people to help you help guide your career.
Yeah.
But what personal
Help you
advice
make
would
a
you
career.
give them aside from that?
Huh?
What personal advice would you give them other than getting good representation? They do make decisions themselves. So what sort of advice would you have for somebody?
Read and understand your own contracts. So have as much knowledge as you can about your own business dealings. Not that you're going to negotiate it or anything else of that nature, but that you have enough knowledge to ask questions to understand what you have, what your issues are, if anything, with the contracts.
The importance of that, is that because ultimately the final decision rests with the artist?
Yes.
And what about for songwriters? What are their biggest challenges in 2022?
Getting your songs placed.
So how do you do that? I mean, what advice do you have for songwriters to get them placed, aside from getting a publisher?
Well, an administrator and not a publisher. My general advice is with songwriters is get an administrator, which is what a publisher does, but don't give away your copyrights. Hold on to your copyrights.
Would you say publishing is more valuable than recordings?
Not necessarily. One doesn't know. In other words, some songwriters make fortunes out of their songs.
I've always felt that the publishing would be worth more, though, because if you make a fortune out of a song, out of a recording, then a lot of people are going to record that composition, do covers of it in the future, and you can continue to earn money off of that.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
I think we talked a little bit about this, but just I want to revisit it. For recording artists, for musicians, over the 70 years, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen artists make, missteps that they've made to really damage their careers?
Not paying attention to their own business, not understanding their contracts, not understanding what their obligations are, not performing according to what those obligations are, assuming all the representatives are doing what they're supposed to without them asking any questions, which they should do. And then big mistakes are made. Many are anxious to sign a contract. Will sign a contract without consulting appropriate representation. And. and signing contracts that are too long, 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 and signing contracts that are too with Chinese contracts too long. Let's see, without, the shorter the contracts, generally the better.
But you're talking about not the length of the pages, but the duration of the term?
Correct.
So what I like is, I mean, you've got a lot of stories that you've had over the years, and I've heard you tell a lot of great stories. But in terms of this, the biggest mistakes that you've seen artists make, failing to follow advice. I mean, sometimes you follow advice, but you get bad advice, right? So, but what, in terms of stories that you could offer, what have you seen, like in real life? You don't have to name names, or you can name names, but of just artists that have just screwed up their career because of failing to do one of those things that you suggested.
Artists that generally have screwed up their careers are ones who are generally ones who do not pay attention to their own career in the way they should. By that I mean, when they have obligations, perform according to those obligations. And there are some artists, particularly when they start to get really successful, are very, what would I say the word, become obnoxious and recalcitrant and get a major ego problem and disrespect the people around them and disrespect what their obligations are. That's the biggest thing that I see is they don't pay attention to their own business.
See, and along those lines, I just remember, I never really researched into this much, but Doug Fieger from the Knack was one. The band The Knack. This was in the late 70s, early 80s, and Doug Fieger, I have heard, went on the radio and just kind of alienated everybody, and that really damaged his career.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that story?
No, I don't know anything about that.
But is that the sort of thing that you've seen?
Yes.
And what happens? How in terms?
They think they're bigger than because everybody is telling them how great they are, and then they no longer listen to good advice. They think they know more than everybody else around them. And they disrespect the people around them, their advisors, their A&R person, their label head, and people then get turned off. They say, okay, screw you.
So people get turned off and say screw you, but what are the real world ramifications of that, what you described? So what? People piss you off, but you're still selling a bunch of records. I mean, how have you seen?
Eventually, the PR people, the A&R people, and all that say, "Screw you! I'm not gonna help you anymore."
So it's okay. You've got a big hit or a couple of big hits, but you lose the support of the people around you, and for that reason, you're unable to maintain it. On the flip side of that, and aside, we talked a little bit about Katy Perry, which was a great story. But in terms of real world stories, and recording artists that you're aware of, that, or what are some examples of just tremendous success stories that you feel that you've witnessed over the years?
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, how do I put this? There's been, like Katy Perry, for example, Sheryl Crow was a studio musician for a long time before she broke out. And a lot of people struggle for a lot of years and, performing or trying, and then they finally get a big break somehow. And I guess what I'm focusing in on an example, because they talk about luck. And luck is defined as when preparation meets opportunity. So who had you seen in your experience that was prepared and grinded, and then that one kind of opportunity came along and they took fully advantage of it because they were really prepared, had done the like.
That's Cheryl. She was a background singer. She was with the Stones. She was with Michael Jackson, and a producer, a well-known record producer by the name of Hugh Padgham, said, "Cheryl, I think you'd be great. Let me see if I can get a deal for you at A&M." And he went to Jerry Moss, and Jerry said, "Yeah, we'll take her." But, then I started to represent her, and I had a difficult time because A&M was kind of reluctant because they were only doing Hugh Padgham a favor because he was a major producer, and they said, "Well, maybe he can do something with her." He brought her to the label. The label didn't find her, and so they went in to produce the record. They did produce the record, and when they got through, the label hated the record, but they loved Cheryl. And then they said to Cheryl, "Why don't you go back in and do it yourself?" And she did, and she went in with her musicians that she was working with, a group called the Tuesday Night Music Club, which became the title of the first album.
I remember that.
Yeah. And 15 million albums. And she was a reluctant signing there.
How did they eventually get behind her? Well, when you said she went in and did it herself, did she produce it?
No, she went in with Hugh Padgham. Hugh Padgham produced the record. That record has never seen the light of day.
Well, but maybe I misunderstood you. That record never saw the light of day.
Right.
They hated the record. They loved her,
Yeah.
and said, "Why don't you go do it yourself?"
Yeah,
So
right.
just describe what you mean by that. Did she go in and produce her own? Did she write her own?
She did with the group that she had a group that they used to meet every Tuesday night called the Tuesday Night Music Club. There's about 5, 6, 7 musicians that she worked with. And they're the ones who were all on that album. And as I say, they liked what she was doing on the album that they never released, but they didn't like the album. But they liked her. They thought very positive about her. So that's the luck of the draw, right? She was not discovered by the label. She was discovered by this individual producer who heard her maybe when she was singing with Michael Jackson or something like that, because she always had a solo. So that's how it happened.
So that is, to say the least, a very rare occurrence. And where you just get discovered like that, particularly as you're just plugging along as a background singer or whatever. So for artists kind of pounding the pavement these days, because that doesn't happen.
I think it was the same thing with Barry Manilow. Barry Manilow was a keyboard player. We saw him with Bette Midler, and she would give him. He was her accompanist, and in the middle of the show, she would give him a number or two to sing. And that's how he got discovered.
And speaking of what, did you know Bette Midler and Barry Manilow?
No, personally, no.
Okay. So again, so that's still, it's kind of rare, right? I mean, we live, because I was going to ask about, we live in a different era now, and everybody thinks ever since Justin Bieber and maybe before that you can just put your music up on YouTube and you're going to be discovered and become a star, and that's exceptionally rare.
Justin Bieber didn't happen that way. Justin Bieber was discovered by somebody else.
Scooter Braun.
No, before Scooter Braun.
Well, he was a 14-year-old kid. His videos went viral on YouTube.
Yeah, but it wasn't Scooter Braun. It was somebody else.
Okay, but either way, that was as a result of his videos going viral on YouTube when he was a 14-year-old kid, right?
I don't know exactly. I can't tell you for sure.
But
I understood it was somebody else who discovered him.
Okay, but regardless of who discovered him, the people still think that I'm going to become a star because I'm going to put some music up on YouTube and somebody's going to discover me, and that's like winning
It's happened.
What's that?
It's happened.
Okay, so to whom has it happened?
I don't know, but I know it's happened.
But the odds are still exceedingly rare, aren't they?
exceedingly rare to succeed in anything.
So, all right. So that which goes to my point then, you know, would you advise a young aspiring musician to go put videos on YouTube or pursue a more traditional path?
Well, I don't know what's traditional anymore. There's nothing wrong with putting it on YouTube. There's nothing wrong with going on TikTok. There's nothing wrong with going out and working clubs. Some people have worked clubs for a couple of years and then get discovered. There's no one way. There's no one source.
What's the best source and the best?
I don't know what the best source is.
Well, in your experience,
best source is the one in which you get discovered. I don't know what that is.
Well, do companies still depend upon A&R departments?
They have A&R departments, but they're not doing what they used to. A&R departments used to go to the clubs.
Right.
They used to go to the clubs and hang out and hear and see what the buzz is in clubs. That's what A&R used to do. Now they scour the internet and see what's happening and see how many followers somebody has. That's what they're doing now.
So the A&R function has changed quite a bit. So that is sounds like a viable business model. Then is to generate your own followers and not depend so much on playing clubs and having an A&R person see you.
If I were a young artist, I'd do all of it.
You would do all of it, clubs and YouTube and TikTok and everything else. And when they discover, do they still perform the same function that, let's just say they find somebody on A&R the A&R department finds somebody on YouTube with a fairly significant number of followers. They, I guess, reach out to that person, whatever. But does the A&R department still perform that function of really trying to develop the artist and work with them for their style and their?
I can't tell you. I don't think as much as they once did. I don't think as much as they would. Bruce Springsteen had 2 failed albums before he hit. That doesn't happen today.
And well, that even by itself was kind of a rare thing, right? Isn't it? Like if you have a failed album, that's pretty much the death.
Now, but then it was whether Mo Austin or David Geffen or Clive Davis or Walter Yetnikoff or Ahmet Ertegun believed in you. If they believed in you, they stuck with you. So they would do one album. If that didn't work, they'd do another one, and maybe a third one, like with Bruce Springsteen.
And that seems to tie into what you were saying with part of the problem of consolidation, because now you're in these big, giant, anonymous corporations, and you don't have somebody that believes in you like that anymore.
Correct.
See, I actually do listen to you.
Well, you don't, because these companies now, by and large, are making decisions by committee. Mo Austin would listen to something and say, like he had Steely Dan. I don't know how much product he had in Steely Dan. I don't know how many albums Steely Dan had out before they really hit. But Mo believed in them. And eventually they hit. And I remember Jerry Moss. I renegotiated Supertramp's deal. They still weren't a major force at all when they were at A&M, but he really believed in them, and so he went all out to make sure they were happy and stand behind them until and then eventually they hit. And that doesn't. Now they have committees that make a decision. Well, this is only going to sell 90,000 now. How do you know that? That's what happens now.
So it sounds like it's more corporate today.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's more analytical today as opposed to the personal and feel emotion that you used to get from. And would you say because, that seems to be somewhat of a tragedy from this perspective, that music in its essence, it still is art. It's an art form, and you can't apply analytics, and you can't apply corporate to it.
Labels are trying to apply analytics to it.
And when we talked before about, terms of changes in the music industry, it sounds to me like you would say that's one of the changes for the worse that you've seen in the last 70 years is that music as an art form is not even necessarily considered an art form as much as it is just pure generating sales.
A commercial product.
A commercial product. Now, I wanted to, this is changing gears a little bit. In terms of negotiating.
Is this a stick shift car?
Yes, this is a stick shift. This is a manual transmission interview. I guess let me ask it this way, because again, growing up to the extent I've grown up, as your son.
That's an assumption.
Yeah, that is an assumption. But I said to the extent I've done it. I didn't assume anything. But I have heard a lot over the years. You've always had a great reputation, and people have constantly. I remember reading an article about your, Jay Cooper is the nice guy. And so my question really is this: there's a lot of jackasses out there, okay, really yellers and screamers and table pounders, in terms of their negotiating. They're not pleasant people. So my first question on this is, well, I guess let me just ask that first of all. How do you deal with that?
I deal with what?
Those types of personalities, those types of lawyers. I mean, what advice, again, even for me, let alone younger attorneys or agents or managers, anybody that's in the position of negotiating, how do you deal with those types of personalities that are just, not just abrasive, but over the top, obnoxious, aggressive assholes? How do you deal with that?
I don't respond in kind.
So what do you mean by that?
Just what I say. I don't yell back at them. They want to yell. They want to be obnoxious. I'll say I'll call you back, or call me back another time, or whatever. I just won't deal with that.
And does that work for you? I mean, do they usually?
It's worked.
What's that?
It's worked.
And what happens if it doesn't? What if they just keep, coming at you or writing you nasty letters and, that type of stuff? I mean, just how do you process that? How do you deal with that?
Well, sometimes they blow the deal.
They blow the deal?
Yeah.
I mean, well, so how do you explain that to, your client in that case? Because if your client really wants the deal, and you're dealing with somebody who's just off the rails on the other side, and an impediment to the deal, I mean, how do you explain that to the client?
It hasn't been a problem. The clients understand that. They don't want to be with that person anyway. There are lots of alternatives.
So,
always been alternatives.
So I once heard, actually, Doris told me that one of the things that you were honored at, and I don't remember exactly what the quote was, and it really bums me out, and I'm hoping you remember. But Doris actually had it written down. I don't know if you can find it, but it was something to the effect, I'm going to be paraphrasing, that, in any negotiation, when you have all the leverage in the negotiation, you have all the bargaining power in your favor, don't use that as an opportunity to crush the other side. It's something to the effect that because, you might be on the other side of that negotiation someday. I mean, is that...
That's generally correct. My feeling is if you're going to be in this business and expect to be in it a long time, you're going to keep running into the same people over and over and over again. And if you kill the other side, they're going to be lying in wait to kill you when they have the opportunity. And I've always believed that it's not necessary to kill the other person. It becomes a major detriment to your future clients or your other clients. I always believe that leaving the other side with some dignity, something, even if you have all of the power. I don't believe in taking every penny off the table where it's not necessary.
So is it good advice? I mean, because sounds like it's good advice, for young attorneys, as an example, is you don't necessarily have to extract every single pound of flesh, and you can actually make some concessions for it may be short-term pain for a long-term gain? I mean, do you find that happening?
Well, I don't find it's any pain at all. I find out that's a good investment. As I say, you're going to be in this business a long time, and you're going to run into the same people over and over and over and over again. And you don't want a reputation as a total killer and an asshole. You don't want that reputation.
I'm going to come back to reputation in a minute, but what do you, again, what are the client? What if you have a client that says, I want to extract every single penny out of that person, and you're representing that person? How do you reconcile that, kind of your reputation, to keep it intact and your relationships intact versus a client?
I have a discussion with him on it. Is it worth it to do this because that person will get back to you if they can. They'll be lying in wait for you, the client, and the next opportunity.
And so it's not just the professionals. I mean, the lawyers and the managers and stuff that have to preserve that reputation. It's the artists as well, for the reasons that we already talked about a little bit.
You know, if a client tortures a record company. When it comes to something really important, watch
out. Do you have any real-world examples of where that's happened?
Oh, I'd have to think about it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I said I'd circle back to reputation. I know you've always instilled in me and taught me that your reputation is the most important thing. It's the only true thing that you own, I think is what you said. You own only two things. I forgot the other one was. What was the other one? Reputation? Time and reputation. So the reputation, and I know you've instilled in me, your reputation always precedes you and it always follows you everywhere you go in this.
Correct. And you lie to somebody in California, in Los Angeles, they know about it in New York, they know about it in Tokyo, they know about it in London.
So how, if you summarize, or if you could just summarize, because you do have a great reputation in this industry, it's a very egotistic industry as well. How have you developed and protected and preserved your reputation in this cutthroat business?
Just being honest, that's all. Just being honest. Try to do as best as you can for your clients, and be honest. Don't lie. Don't lie. You'll be found out. Don't lie. And when they find out that you lied, everybody else will know that you lied. It's not complicated. This is not rocket science. It's just being straightforward. If you're straightforward and you deal straightforward and you do a great job and you get a reputation for doing a great job for your client, and you've done it with dignity and honesty, that's what it takes. It's not complicated. It's not. You don't have to go through any special training for it.
And yet, there's so many attorneys out there that just can't seem to do that.
That's correct. I don't understand it. But
well, now I've got, and I never fail to tell people who will listen to some of my stories about the worst conduct that I've ever seen attorneys engage in, and there's been some funny ones, but disturbing ones as well. Without naming names, can you state like what some of the worst conduct you've seen a lawyer engage in, and a manager engage in, and an agent as well? Because I'm going to switch to film and TV at some point.
Attorney engagement. I was doing a deal. I was representing Polygram Records, and I was doing a deal with Frank Zappa. For Frank Zappa, he was going to deliver 5 albums, and I'm negotiating with the Frank Zappa's attorney, and I asked him a question. I says, have there been any other deals done on these albums? Are they committed to anywhere? I said, no. Something may be suspicious about it. I called Warner Brothers. Turns out that he made a deal with Warner's while I'm negotiating for Polygram for the same product.
Okay, that's just purely underhanded.
I haven't talked to that attorney.